Hello and welcome back. This is Adam Rosen. You're listening to the Total Knee Tips and Pearls podcast. So on today's episode, I wanted to just follow up with hips and implants. And then on the next episode, I'm still working on compiling. There's a little bit more information there as far as knee implants to share with you. But I just had some questions that people liked the stems, but they said, hey, what about cups? And that's a common question I think a lot of people have if you're jumping from system to system. And some people will make a decision based on a particular system based on someone's anatomy. So if they're looking at a small patient and they want to have a big head size, they might modify which system they use. Now, today, the options are a lot simpler and easier because if cups have changed. That's been one of the big issues that many of the systems have changed towards, is offering larger head sizes at smaller outer cup diameters. But it is important to understand because, with certain companies, do you ream line to line? Do you ream under? So I actually went back and I pulled all the surgical techniques manuals just to get the company line for each of these systems. And hopefully I don't make any mistakes. But again, check with your representative and read your manual, obviously, before you do any surgery. But this hopefully will be a good overview. And I covered the four most common companies that we're going to see or utilize in the United States. So Zimmer, Stryker, DePuy, and Smith & Nephew. And I've used all of these systems. So let's just jump right into it. So with Zimmer's cup, this is the G7 cup. And I've been a big fan of the G7 cup for a while now, just because of some things that I'll talk about. And one of the big things is that in the beginning, it really offered me a large head size. So when we talk about reaming, the recommended reaming is under by 1. So if you're putting a 50 millimeter cup in, you're going to be reaming up to 49 millimeters. Put your 50 millimeter cup in to get a good fit. Now, the nice thing with the Zimmer G7 cup is that you do get 36 millimeter head options at 50, but not just 50 neutral. You get 50 with all the bells and whistles. So you get the high wall, you get the 10 degree, you get the +5 lateralized, where you'll see with a lot of the systems, you might get 50 at a smaller cup size, but only in the neutral flat. And then you don't get the options until you get to the next cup size up. So that's the nice thing. So Zimmer G7, ream under by 1, 50 millimeter cup gives you 36 millimeter inner diameter options with all of the bells and whistles. Now, if you're interested in, well, what about 40? When do you get a 40 millimeter head? You get 40 millimeter at 54. Things that I do like about the Zimmer cup, I do like, especially my reps like, or my techs like the fact that it's color coded at the rim. So when they're looking at a size, the color code lets them know which trial they're going to be pulling out. I like the idea, hopefully, again, with a lot of these implants, we never ever see them ever again, but they have the number. So a lot of times if you've ever done a hip revision and you don't have an operative report and you're trying to look at the rim deep in a hole covered by bone and tissue and try to figure out what size is the actual cup, they've had this printed on the base of the cup. So when you're staring in there, you're actually looking right at the size. So it makes it really easy if you were going to do a revision down the road and didn't have access to the actual implant records. Now, next in line I'll talk about is Stryker. I was a big Stryker user for a long time, and previously we had the Tritanium cup, which was a hemispherical cup, and you didn't get into the 36 millimeter options until you got up to around 54. So a lot of times we'd use a 50 PSL Trident cup, which was the rim fit cup, which you did ream line to line because the rim was a 1.8 millimeter buildup, and you could get 36 at 50. Now, with Stryker's newer cup now, the Trident II Tritanium, it's kind of a bit of a mouthful. Their recommendation is to ream this line to line, reason being that the cup is 0.5 millimeters bigger. So you're getting this 0.5 millimeter additional fit after you've reamed line to line. Now, this, when we talk about head sizes, like I was talking about before, there's really two options. So when you get to a 48 or 50 millimeter cup with the Trident II Tritanium, you can get the 36D liner. And the 36D liner only comes in neutral. So if you just need a neutral 36 millimeter liner, it'll fit into the 48 or 50 millimeter cup. However, if you want to get up into the E liner, which is also 36 millimeter inner diameter, but with the bells and whistles, so your 10-degree lip or your eccentric liner, you have to get your cup up to a 52. The nice thing is, if you wanted to go 40, you could go 40 at 52. With Zimmer, you do have 40 options with different lip combinations, whereas in the Stryker system, currently 40, 44, when you go that route, only neutral. Things that I don't like about this new cup, it is really hard to see the line. So when you're trying to line up the liner and you're trying to line it up, whatever they use to score it with a little black line on the outer rim of the cup is very difficult to see in a surgical field in the hole. And it sounds like a lot of people have had those same issues. So I don't know if they're going to plan on changing that in the future. But that's one of the downsides I've had with this system. Things that I do like, I think their new configuration for the drill bit placing screws has very, very nice configuration and makes it easy to get some weird angles. So that's kind of the pros and the cons of that system. If we go into DePuy and the Pinnacle Cup, which has had a great track record, has been around for a lot of years, and you have many, many options with it. The technique manual, I was always an under ream by 1 when I used Pinnacle, but actually when I went back and scrutinized the techniques manual from DePuy, it did mention that if you're under reaming by 1, which was for most, and they said for most small cups. However, if you were putting in a larger cup, it was recommended you may need to under ream by 1 or 2 millimeters. And then they also left a broad open spot for everybody, because they then said, based on bone quality, you may choose to ream line to line. So basically, line to line, under by 1, under by 2. I have most frequently reamed under by 1 with the Pinnacle Cup. Now, with the Pinnacle Cup, you do get 36 millimeter inner diameter options at 52. So that was always been one of the things that when I was between systems, a lot of times, if I had a very small patient, I may not use the DePuy system because I was afraid that I might not be able to get up to 52 if I wanted to get a 36 head. You do get 36 with their +4 and their +4 10-degree. If you go 40, you have to get up to a 56 cup. So definitely a bigger jump than Stryker's, which you get 40 at 52, and Zimmer's G7, where you get 40 at 54. But it is an option. The one thing I didn't really like with the DePuy, and again, this is more of something that I noticed, although when you look at the techniques and range of motion and the data, it's supposed to not have this difference, but the Charnley bore, that +4 millimeter lateralized, I found that in very hypermobile patients that there was a concern of that neck impinging on the lip in different areas. So you were pushing it out, and this was sort of their contingency for their head sizes, which jumped from a +1.5 to 5. If you were sort of in that in-between zone, the idea would be you could not make them long with the +5, but leave the +1.5 and put the Charnley bore, the +4. But I always found, and I was concerned about neck impinging on the cup. I had one patient in all my years that had dissociated a cup after a couple of years. Heavy-duty bike rider, put a lot of miles, and I'm not sure whether or not the neck with that +4 Charnley bore was a factor, but that was always been one of my concerns, or sort of the downside, in my opinion, with that system. And then lastly on this list, we'll talk about the Smith & Nephew Reflection Cup. Again, I went back and scrutinized their techniques manual. I've always under reamed by 1 when I used it. Their recommendations in their techniques manual was ream under by 1, or you could, if you wanted to, ream line to line. You get 36 millimeter inner diameter options at 52. And if you were looking to go 40, you have to get up to a 56 cup. The one thing I really do like about the Smith & Nephew Pinnacle Cup, especially if you're using lips of some sort, is the way that the scallops are made. You do have the ability to really dial it in, I think, just perfectly. I think with some systems, like even with Zimmer and Stryker, what I found is that a lot of times, if you did have to use a lip for some reason, you kind of dial it. You're like, oh, it's a little high, but I move it to the next scallop. Oh, it's a little bit low. I wish it was halfway in between. And because there's more scallops on the Smith & Nephew, it really, I think, offers you that ability to really dial it in exactly where you want that lip to go if you have to do it. Now, the The downside that I used to have with the older style cups, and it's not as bad with the newer ones, is that if you had to do a revision, you really had to clear out the edge to make sure that you had access to the outer rim so that the poly would seat if you were doing a revision. I haven't done a revision on the newest version, so I'm not 100% sure as to whether or not that's still an issue with the latest cup. So, there you have it, sort of the four common systems there. I think the big things being that, for the most part, Stryker's new Trident II Tritanium cup ream line to line, where again, if you were using some of their older cups, it was different. Zimmer, DePuy, Smith & Nephew, pretty much under by one, but also both DePuy and Smith & Nephew offer a little wiggle room where they'll say you can ream line to line, or even in a bigger cup, ream under by two. And then again, 36 millimeter options. So you have your smallest 36 only in neutral, liner option for the new Stryker Trident II at 48. You can get 36 with all the bells and whistles at 50 with the Zimmer G7 system. You can get 36 at 52, both with DePuy and Smith & Nephew. And then again, if you're a 40 millimeter head fan, you can get a 40 millimeter head with the new Stryker Trident II Tritanium at 52. You can get 40 millimeter inner diameter options with Zimmer at 54. And you can get 40 millimeter inner diameter options with DePuy and Smith & Nephew at 56. So hopefully I got all that correct, but it gives you a little brief overview and a little cheat sheet if you need to go back and sort of reference this quickly before a conference. Or if you're thinking about dealing with a small patient where you may need a larger head than 32. A lot more options too if we start to get into dual mobility and constrained, but I think I'll save all that for some future episodes. So until next time, stay safe. I'm Adam Rosen. Thanks for listening. You've been tuning into the Total Knee Tips and Pearls podcast. If you haven't already, please subscribe, leave a review. It helps other people like you find this podcast, and I'll talk to you next time. You've been listening to the Total Knee Tips and Pearls podcast. Make sure that you're subscribed so you'll be notified of future episodes. And please take the time to leave a review. It helps other people like you find the show. Until next time, stay safe.